Hey everyone, I'm the Canadian lad, and I just watched the second episode of Loki at 0.2 Febic speed and found some amazing details. Today's episode has by far made the most impact in the MCU comparing to WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, because by the time this episode ended, there are now some chaos in the multiverse. So I'm gonna break it down all for you shot by shot, and if any scenes happen to have an Easter egg or a detail that I caught in slow motion, I'll explain that too. So this is a complete breakdown plus my 0.2 Febic speed series. But before I begin, I would like to give a huge shout out to today's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. Raid just added 3 new bosses, but let me tell you about my favorite one, Fire Knight. First of all, that's such a badass name, and he literally looks like a medieval version of Ghost Rider. He has this fire shield that makes him immune to debuffs and damage, so you'll really need to use champions that deliver multiple hits per attack to actually cause this guy some damage. The Fire Knight is set to be one of the most challenging bosses to beat. One of my favorite things to do in game before facing the Doom Tower is leveling up my champions at the tavern to make them stronger. You can do this by sacrificing on the champions you may not be using. What I really like about Raid is that they're always adding new stuff. They brought in 11 new champions for June. Like this guy, he looks like a freaking hippo. And if you'd like a huge start in Raid, click the link in my description or scan the QR code. All new players will get the epic hero Shinaru, who's helpful in the Doom Tower. You'll also get 200,000 silver, 1 XP boost, 1 energy refill, and 1 ancient shard, which allows you to summon champions as soon as you get them in game. You'll find all the rewards right here for the next 30 days. Today's episode begins with Renaissance Fair in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. It's a festival where you get a little bit of everything. People dress up, there are comedy shows, and every type of food you can imagine. Now right at the beginning we get an Easter egg of Dragonfly, which actually is a Marvel character. Enters Hunter C-20 along with 3 Minutemen, who apparently have tracked down a variant aka Lady Loki. Now Lady Loki uses her mind-controlling power to turn Hunter C-20 against her own team. We've seen our Loki do the same at the beginning of Avengers 1 with Hawkeye, but notice he had to use the scepter in order to do that. But Lady Loki can pretty much do that with her bare hands. This already foreshadows just how much more powerful she is than this Loki. Anyway, she steals a device from the TVA to open this doorway, through which she escapes, but this time around, she actually takes a TVA agent hostage. Previously, she never took anybody hostage, so there is a reason behind this. I'll explain it in a minute. Then the title appears and we see variant Loki all dressed up as a TVA staffer, so he's no longer wearing a convict jumpsuit. He reads a jet ski magazine and we learn that this belongs to Mobius. So Mobius essentially gave his desk to Loki so that he can learn all the TVA terms and procedures. For instance, here we learn what really happens when a Nexus event branches past the red line. That's when the TVA loses the ability to reset that Nexus event, which would eventually lead to the destruction of the timeline. So this red line that we see is really dangerous, and no branch in time should ever cross this. Mobius comes to Loki with a TVA jacket, but it says variant at the back. So even though Loki is wearing the same shirt as Mobius, but his jacket is what differs him from the rest of the team. They all discuss the attack in Wisconsin that we've seen earlier, and plans on how to take down this Loki variant using this Loki variant. We see multiple versions of Loki through this holographic image, and one of them happens to be a monster Hulk Loki. We also see a frost giant Loki, which is how he's supposed to be. Now Loki over here flexes a little bit over his power and pretty much explains the difference between an illusion and duplication. For example, what Loki did in Endgame was duplication, and what he did in Avengers 1 was an illusion. But notice out of all these Loki variants, the Hulk version is what surprises Loki the most, which makes sense because his wound from that Hulk smash is still relatively fresh. So he got surprised to realizing that there's a variant of himself roaming around that looks like Hulk. They all travel to Wisconsin, and over here Marvel tackles another plot hole.
Why don't we just travel back to before the attack, when the variant first arrives?
Even I was wondering the same, why wouldn't they? Well, according to Mobius, Nexus events destabilize the time flow, so the TVA can just go back and forth in the timeline, if that makes sense. Now, a Minuteman asks Loki a question to find out whether he learned anything through his training, and rightly so, Loki gives the correct answer.
What do these do?
Reset charges prune the affected radius of a branched timeline, allowing time to heal all its wounds. Which, by the way, sounds like a nice way of saying disintegrate everything in its vicinity.
But notice, just as Loki proves that he did pay attention in his training, Mobius does this, implying Loki is smart. Cut to inside the tent, where they all find out that female Loki has taken hostage for the first time. That too C-20, not just any regular Minuteman. Now this Loki puts up a show. He says that the TVA are just as gullible as the people of Asgard. Both are drunk with power and blinded to the truth. He says the fact that the TVA is underestimating the Loki variants will in fact bring its doom. He claims that going after the missing TVA agent is exactly what female Loki wants. This almost convinces Mobius. Hell, even I bought it for a second. But even though this Loki might have said all this to play around, but this entire conversation will come very handy towards the end of this episode. In fact, I'll even go as far as saying that this one single scene might have foreshadowed the entire plotline of the show. The TVA then resets the timeline, and in the monitor we see a branch in time going backwards. But notice we not only see Oshkosh, Wisconsin, but Nidavellir and Sakaar as well. Nidavellir is of course where Thor forged his Stonebreaker in Infinity War, and Sakaar is the planet where most of Thor Ragnarok takes place. It's nice to see details such as this that always keep reminding us it's all connected. Cut to Ravonna Renslayer's office, where the three timekeepers are visible once again. Now the way Ravonna is obsessed with the timekeepers, it kinda indicates the story might be inspired by the source material where she's in love with Kang the Conqueror. I really think there's a lot more to her character than what we've seen so far. We may have just scratched the surface. She's gonna pull the big guns in the future episodes. Now listen to what Mobius says here.
Here's what we did find out. The variant likes to stall for time, and eventually we'll catch the other one doing the same thing because understanding this Loki helps me get closer to the one we're chasing.
This is 100% accurate, because female Loki did the exact same thing at the end.
Thank you for helping me stall for time.
Now there's another subtle detail in this scene. Mobius asks Ravonna how are the old timekeepers doing.
How are the old timekeepers?
And notice she immediately looks at the statue that is in the middle, doesn't even pay attention to the rest of them. This subtle detail might indicate that this in fact is Kang the Conqueror. Ravonna then hands over this file to Mobius for his signature. Notice the file isn't filled with any random text either. It has the place written as Wisconsin, and time status as Earth 1985. And also the event summary isn't random. Marvel literally made sure to put accurate details in here, even though we can't read most of the text. It mentions 3 Minutemen and Hunter C-20. Basically whatever we saw happening at the beginning of the episode in Wisconsin is written here. This is the level of attention to detail I love. And notice Mobius' signature is just 3M, because his full name is Mobius M. Mobius. Loki then admits to Mobius that he has been playing a game of his own all along, and just as I predicted in my episode 1 breakdown, Loki actually planned on taking over the TVA by charming his way through the timekeepers. But Mobius of course knows this, but Loki realizes he cannot overcome Mobius that easily. So Loki asked Mobius, why would you stick your neck out for me if you don't trust me? And here's what Mobius had to say.
Why are you in there sticking your neck out for me?
Because I see a scared little boy shivering in the cold, and you kind of feel bad for that ice runt.
A scared little boy shivering in the cold. Does it ring any bell? Well, this is the exact state Loki was in when Odin decided to adopt him. So in a sense, the fact that Mobius is trying to give this Loki a second chance is because he feels pity for him. Cut to this beautiful shot of the timekeepers with elevators in the background. Notice the elevators are not carrying people. Instead, they're used to move files. We can also see it says TVA Archive in both corners. So now it makes sense why all these files are sent down here. Now the floor Mobius takes Loki to is 372, which could be a nod that the TVA made its debut in Thor Volume 1 number 372. Loki then asked to see all the files pertaining to the creation of TVA, the beginning of time until the end of time. But this lady said all those files are classified, meaning those files do exist. Otherwise she would have just said something else. She then gives Loki this file to read about his own life. And here Loki comes across this page describing the destruction of Asgard. Now let's break down this page, shall we? We can see that the events of Ragnarok has been labeled as Class 7 Apocalypse out of 10. So even though a planet is getting destroyed, it's still labeled as 7, but the rock-scarred apocalypse at the end was labeled a level 10. This is because there were still some survivors in Asgard, but in Alabama in 2050, the entire city is gonna get wiped. Then it says there was no variance involvement, meaning it's happening in the sacred timeline. And if you notice very carefully, the codename of this event is Revengers.
But I want to be on the team. Has it got a name?
Yeah, it's called the Revenges.
The Revenges?
Because I'm getting revenge. You're getting revenge, and you what do you want revenge?
I'm undecided.
Okay.
So even though Thor came up with this name sarcastically, but the timekeepers took it very seriously. Now there's one final detail from this scene that I just can't talk about enough. Notice Loki began to tear up as soon as he read the line that says, entire civilization annihilated. So no matter what kind of facade Loki puts up, deep inside he does care about Asgard and its people. Now reading this file, Loki comes up with a theory. A theory, if proven correct, could unleash a huge loophole in the entire TVA system. So he runs to Mobius to share his theory. But notice on his way we can see 2 posters. times. One of them says minimize chit-chat in the cafeteria please, and to limit your lunch break to 17 minutes. Now the theory Loki came up with goes something like this. Imagine Asgard just a few hours before Ragnarok. There's chaos, there's fight, but the planet is still there, right? So now imagine you're a variant on the most wanted list in the TVA. So where do you hide? Because no matter where you go, you're gonna create a branch in time. So you gotta go somewhere where your presence makes no changes in the timeline. Make sense? Okay, now let's go back to Asgard, which is destined to be disrupted in a few hours. Now because Asgard is already predetermined to get disrupted, so no matter what you do here will not create a branch in time, meaning the timekeepers will not know of any new changes. So for you who's a variant on the run, this could be the perfect place to hide, because you entering the planet doing whatever you want will not make any branch in time. And that's why Loki said if his theory is correct, they will find female Loki hiding in the apocalypse. So to test Loki's theory, Mobius and Loki go to Pompeii, Italy, the city which was literally swallowed by volcanic eruption in 79 AD. So the idea is Loki and Mobius will make some small disturbances and wait for the apocalypse to take place. Then they'll be able to verify whether or not the device detects any variant energy, because it should. But if it doesn't, then Loki's theory will prevail. And rightly so, the device doesn't detect any variance energy, despite Loki being there, and does not create a branch in time. Mobius then admits that Loki's theory is correct, but in order for it to work, disasters have to be natural, sudden with no warnings. This way they can at least make a list of apocalypses where they can go and look for female Loki. Mobius and Loki have a very deep conversation about the very existence of life. Mobius acknowledges how much he loves jet ski, and notice he specifically talks about the early 1990s.
In the early 1990s, for a brief, shining moment, there was a beautiful union of form and function, which we call the jet ski.
This could be another reference to the fact that Mobius made his comic book debut in the year 1991 in Fantastic Four number 353. During the conversation, Mobius suddenly remembers about the candy that he got from a crime scene. Now this candy was only produced on Earth between 2047 and 2051. So the fact that female Loki had this candy bar means she must have gotten from the years between 2047 to 2051. Now all they could look for if there was any disasters between those years, and if Kablooey candy was available at the time. They come down to the year 2050, which is a perfect match. Now if I could rewind a minute, notice one of the files Mobius has says destruction of the Bifrost, which is a very subtle callback to Thor 1. Mobius then takes permission from Renslayer and prepares for the mission. Now Hunter B-15 says the variant shouldn't know the TVA are coming, but to their surprise the variant knew exactly what they're doing. So they all go to the year 2050 and visit Roxgard. Now even though Roxgard and Roxxon are not similar, but because of the way they're spelled, we could say Roxgard is a branch of Roxxon. The Roxxon Corporation is one of the world's largest conglomerates, and we've seen Roxxon already in previous MCU films. Variant Loki sets a timer of 20 minutes and disguises herself as this man in the store. B-15 and Loki both find this suspicious, as no one should be here shopping for plants in this storm. B-15 approaches this man, and immediately female Loki passes herself from this man's body to B-15's. If you notice carefully, you can even notice the aura of female Loki passing through, so it's evident that she's able to possess anyone's body. Now this specific ability of hers might indicate something else. I'm gonna talk about it at the end of this video, so make sure to stick around. Now I find this introduction between these two Lokis hilarious.
Me, I presume.
Please, if anyone's anyone, you're me.
Now notice the first thing female Loki says to our Loki.
So, you're the fool the TVA brought in to hunt me down.
Isn't this surprising? The sacred timeline has already been reset, so nobody should be aware of this Loki variant. Then how come female Loki knows about him? I understand she's very powerful and whatnot, but the fact that she knows classified information of the TVA indicates there might be a higher power working with her. Mobius then comes across C-20, who was taken hostage at the beginning of the episode. Now as I said, I'll explain the reason why female Loki took her hostage in the first place. Well, it's probably to extract information from her, so that female Loki can bond the sacred timeline and know where the timekeepers are. Female Loki keeps passing herself into multiple bodies, and the way this happens kind of resembles what happened with the symbiotes in the movie Venom. As soon as it goes from one body to another, the previous body falls unconscious. Now notice the name tags are not made of paper or plastic, which makes sense considering it's the year 2050. Then she comes in another form to fight Loki, basically stalling for time. Loki did deduce that female Loki is trying to blow up something. Little did he know that she's planning to bomb the entire timeline. With only a few seconds left on the timer, she appears in her actual form and bombs the entire sacred timeline. Even though the TVA may reset some of the timelines, but can you reset that many? Now come to think of it, it actually makes sense that she chose the year 2050 as a hideout, that too in a place that is owned by Roxxon, because she needed advanced technology to make all the reset chargers sync together. After she does what she wanted, she simply escapes through this time door. Now notice our Loki was simply standing here without making any movements, but despite that, Mobius kept shouting, "Loki, wait, wait, Loki," as if Mobius wanted to plant the idea on his head that this is the chance he should escape, as if he wanted Loki to escape. I found this quite odd, to be honest. Over there, Ravonna Renslayer gets shocked seeing all these branches in time. She takes her weapon and rushes outside, but notice the number on her helmet is A23. This is a reference to her first appearance in Avengers 23. Now in the monitor, we could see the places Lady Loki has bombed. Let's break it down for a second. Apart from all the countries that we know exist, let's talk about the fictional places in the MCU. We see Vormir, where the Soul Stone is, Asgard, which is, Asgard, Sakaar, a planet we've seen in Thor Ragnarok, Ego, which is Ego's own planet, Titan, the home of Thanos, New York, where most of the Avengers live, and lastly Hela, the Kree homeworld, and Xandar, the headquarters of the Nova Corps. Now one little detail here is that female Loki has one of her horns half broken. This is accurate to the comic version, so both Lokis escape through this time door, and the TVA fails miserably, and that's where today's episode ends. Now as I said, I'll talk about Lady Loki's ability of possessing others. Well, whatever I'm gonna say next might spoil the third episode for you, but please take this with a grain of salt, as what I'm about to say is purely out of my head and have no strong evidences yet. But I think Sophia Di Martino is not playing Lady Loki in the show. I think she may be playing the Asgardian villain Enchantress. Both Loki and Enchantress have similar color suit, and Marvel is probably using this to mislead the audience in order to give a bigger shock at the end. Now the biggest proof of her playing Enchantress and not Lady Loki is the credits. Someone on Twitter has actually found that in Spanish language on Disney Plus, the dubbing credits has her character name as Sylvie. Now in the comics, the second Enchantress was named Sylvie Luston. So that's what I'm betting on. Sophia Di Martino is probably playing a little bit more than Lady Loki. And that's it. This would be my breakdown of Loki episode 2. I hope I managed to give you lads a few new details that you missed in your first viewing. If I did, then please give me a thumbs up, grab the subscribe button, and turn notifications on. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter to get updates about my videos. Till then, I'll see you lads in the next one.